All right, buckle up, everybody, because we are diving deep today
It is
into thinking errors with Rolf Dobelli's The Art of Thinking. Clearly, it is it's a guidebook to all the mental traps we fall into.
Exactly.
And let me tell you, reading this was a real wake-up call.
Oh, for sure. I think for a lot of people.
Yeah.
What's so interesting about this book is that it's not like, your typical dry
Absolutely. Textbook.
Yeah, textbook, academic,
Right.
treatise or something like that.
Yes.
Dobelli's he's a novelist and entrepreneur.
Yes.
So he has this really relatable, engaging style
Totally.
to a topic that could feel really overwhelming.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He really just dives right in and makes it clear that these thinking errors aren't just for
Right.
The absent-minded professor.
Yeah.
They affect all of us.
All of us, yeah.
Every day. And
I've
that's
heard-
what's so interesting about this, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're all making these mistakes,
Right.
how do we learn to avoid them?
Right, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the million-dollar question, I think.
Yeah.
One of the key takeaways from this book is that we're often wired to think in ways that worked great for our ancestors, but not so much in today's world.
Right.
Think about it. Our brains evolved in a time when, the biggest threat was
A saber-toothed tiger.
a saber-toothed tiger hiding in the bushes,
Right, right.
And we had to make these
Quick decisions.
quick decisions based on limited information.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
But how does that translate to,
Yeah.
deciding what we're going to have for dinner or, which car to buy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dobelli's argument is that our modern environment,
Right.
with its endless choices and information overload,
Right.
is basically a breeding ground for all these thinking errors. We're constantly bombarded with stimuli, and our brains are just trying to make sense of it all,
Right.
often relying on these shortcuts and biases that don't always serve us well.
So we're basically running around with Stone Age brains,
Right.
trying to navigate a Silicon Valley world.
Pretty much.
Okay?
Yeah.
And that's why understanding these errors is so crucial, right?
Yes.
It's like having a map
Yes.
to avoid these mental potholes on the road to better decision-making.
Okay. I am on board with that analogy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of these mental potholes then.
Right.
What's one of the big ones that Dobelli really highlights?
One that really jumps out is survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias. Okay.
Yeah. We tend to focus on these success stories, the people who made it,
Right.
and overestimate our own chances of achieving the same.
Okay.
Think about it. Imagine you're walking through a forest, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all you see are the tallest trees. So you would assume that all the trees in that forest are massive.
Exactly. You're missing all the smaller trees that didn't survive.
Right.
The ones that maybe didn't get enough sunlight
Right.
or were struck by lightning.
Okay.
And it's the same with success.
Okay.
We see the entrepreneurs, the athletes, the artists who have reached the top,
Yeah.
but we don't see all the ones who struggled, failed, or simply gave up.
Yeah. That's so true.
Right.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah.
I've definitely daydreamed about becoming a best-selling author and being on book tours and signing autographs.
But you don't see the countless hours of writing, editing, rejection that go into even getting a book published, let alone,
Becoming a bestseller.
becoming a bestseller.
Yeah.
So that's survivorship bias at work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a serious reality check.
Yeah.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap then?
Right.
Because I definitely don't want to be, stumbling around in this mental forest,
Yeah.
oblivious to all the fallen trees,
Yeah. One key is to be aware of the what's called the silent evidence.
Okay.
So those who didn't make it, it's looking for clues, not just in the successes, but also in the failures.
Yeah.
What obstacles did others face?
Right.
What mistakes did they make?
I guess it's easy to just get caught up in those highlight reels, but
Yeah.
those don't tell the whole story.
Exactly. And speaking of getting caught up, Dobelli also talks about the sunk cost fallacy.
The sunk cost fallacy. Okay.
Which is another one of those sneaky mental traps that can really lead us astray.
Okay, the sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one where you're throwing good money after bad?
Yeah, it can be.
Okay.
But it applies to more than just money. It's about that tendency to cling to things.
Okay.
Whether it's projects,
relationships,
Oh,
even
really?
beliefs,
Okay.
simply because we've already invested so much in them.
Okay, yeah, I've totally been there. Like,
Yeah.
that time I spent months trying to learn how to play the ukulele.
Right.
Even though my fingers felt like they were going to fall off and my cat, like, started hiding whenever I picked it up.
Right. And you kept going because you had already invested.
So I was like, well, I've already invested all this time and effort.
Even though it was clearly not bringing you joy.
Exactly. And it wasn't even like I was making any progress.
Right.
I mean, my Twinkle Twinkle Little Star was still pretty questionable.
That's the sunk cost fallacy in action.
Okay.
It tricks us into thinking like, well, I've come this far.
Yeah.
I can't give up now.
Yeah.
But the rational approach is to ask yourself, is this still worth my time and energy, regardless of what I've already invested? Okay, that's a really helpful way to frame it.
Yeah.
It's not about ignoring past investments, but about making decisions based on what's best for the future.
Exactly. The past is sunk,
but
the future's still in your hands.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not just time and effort. It can also be, unhealthy relationships, dead-end jobs, or even just bad habits.
Okay, now that you mention that, I know a few people who could really benefit from reading this chapter.
Right.
But seriously, how do we break free from this sunk cost cycle?
Yeah.
It feels like it can be so hard to let go.
Yeah.
Even when, something's not working.
It is tough, but awareness is the first step. Once you start to recognize those whispers in your mind, I've already invested so much, or I can't give up now, you can start to question them.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what are the real costs of continuing down this path?
Right.
What opportunities am I missing out on?
So it's about shifting our focus from the past to the future.
Exactly.
Kind of like we talked about with survivorship bias.
Right.
Instead of dwelling on what we've already lost, we should consider what we stand to gain by making a change, right?
Exactly. And that brings us to another interesting thinking error that Dobelli explores. The paradox of choice.
Ooh, the paradox of choice.
Yeah.
Okay, what's that all about? Is it like when you're standing in the cereal aisle for like 20 minutes trying to decide between Frosted Flakes and granola?
It can be, but it goes beyond breakfast cereal. It's this idea that having more options while seemingly appealing can actually lead to less satisfaction and even paralysis.
Wait, so more choice can actually be a bad thing?
Yeah.
But isn't more always better?
That's what we're often led to believe.
Yeah.
But Dobelli argues that too much choice can overwhelm us, making it harder to decide. Right.
Leading to feelings of, anxiety and regret.
Okay, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah.
I remember spending like hours online trying to pick out a new pair of headphones. And there were just so many options. And I ended up feeling totally overwhelmed and like second guessing myself, even after I finally, made a purchase.
That's a classic example of the paradox of choice in action.
Okay.
And it can have real consequences.
Right.
It can lead us to, delay decisions or settle for something that's not truly what we want.
So what's the antidote to this decision-making paralysis? Should we just blindfold ourselves and just pick things at random?
Well, that might work in some cases, but Dobelli suggests a more nuanced approach.
Yeah.
He recommends, setting clear criteria for what you're looking for.
Okay.
Narrowing your options down to a manageable few.
Okay.
And then making the decision and sticking with it. So basically, be more intentional with our choices.
Exactly.
And don't get bogged down in the, endless comparison.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance between, exploring possibilities and committing to a decision.
And speaking of making decisions, Dobelli also talks about social proof.
Ah, yes, social proof.
Which I think we all, experience, whether we realize it or not.
This one is particularly powerful as it taps into our innate desire to fit in and conform.
Right.
We look to others for cues on how to behave, what to believe, even what to buy.
Like those times when you see a long line outside a restaurant?
Yeah.
And you automatically assume it must be good, even though you have no idea what they serve.
Exactly. Yeah. Or when you're scrolling through social media and see everyone raving about a certain product, and suddenly you feel like you need it too, even though you've never even considered it before.
Okay, that hits close to home.
Yeah.
I definitely have a weakness for those must-have items that everyone seems to be talking about.
But I guess that's just our brains being wired to follow the crowd. It's a powerful force, and marketers know it. They use testimonials, influencer endorsements, even fake scarcity to create that illusion of social proof and nudge us toward their products or services.
So how do we resist the siren song of the crowd? Should we just become hermits and avoid all human contact?
Well, that's one way to do it, but a more practical approach is to be aware of the power of social proof and to question those automatic assumptions. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's the right choice for you.
So we need to be more critical thinkers and evaluate things based on our own values and needs rather than just blindly following the herd.
Exactly. It's about being a discerning individual, not a mindless sheep.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about survivorship bias, the sunk cost fallacy, the paradox of choice, and social proof. What other mental potholes do we need to watch out for?
One that's particularly relevant in today's world is the availability bias.
Okay, the availability bias. That sounds kind of familiar. But refresh my memory, what exactly does that entail?
So it's the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easily recalled or vivid in our minds. In other words, if something comes to mind quickly and effortlessly, we tend to assume it's more common or more likely to happen than it actually is.
So, like, if I just watched a documentary about shark attacks, I might suddenly be terrified of swimming in the ocean.
Exactly.
Even though statistically, I'm much more likely to, get in a car accident on the way to the beach.
Exactly. Our brains are wired to prioritize information that's emotionally charged or readily available. And that can really skew our perception of risk and probability.
That makes sense. And I guess this is especially true in the age of 2047 news and social media, where we're constantly bombarded with, sensationalized stories and clickbait headlines.
Absolutely. The media often focuses on the dramatic and the unusual, which can distort our view of reality. And because we see these stories repeated over and over again, they become more easily accessible in our minds, fueling that availability bias.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap? Should we just stop watching the news and delete all of our social media?
Well, that's certainly one option. But a more balanced approach is to be mindful of the sources of our information and to cultivate a healthy skepticism towards, sensationalized stories.
So basically, be more aware of how our emotions and exposure to media can influence our thinking.
Precisely. And speaking of how our emotions can lead us astray, Dobelli also explores the powerful influence of what he calls the story bias.
Story bias. Okay, that one sounds interesting. What's that all about?
Well, as humans, we're naturally drawn to stories. We use them to make sense of the world, to connect with others, and to create meaning in our own lives. But sometimes our desire for a good story can actually lead us to distort reality.
So we basically start to see patterns and narratives even where they don't exist.
Exactly. Our brains love to create a cohesive narrative, even if that means filling in the gaps with assumptions, generalizations, or even outright fabrications.
Wow.
We crave that sense of order and coherence, even if it means sacrificing accuracy.
Okay, I can see how that could be a problem. But are you saying that all stories are bad?
No, not at all. Stories can be really powerful and inspiring. They can teach us, move us, and connect us in profound ways. But it's important to be aware of the potential pitfalls of story bias, especially when making important decisions.
So how do we distinguish between a helpful story and a harmful one?
Dobelli suggests a few strategies. First, be wary of stories that oversimplify complex issues or offer easy answers to difficult questions. Second, look for evidence to support the claims being made in a story. And finally, be willing to consider alternative perspectives and narratives, even if they challenge your own beliefs.
So basically, be a critical consumer of stories.
Exactly. And don't just blindly accept everything you hear.
Okay, that's a great reminder. Now, speaking of things that can cloud our judgment. Dobelli also talks about the halo effect.
The halo effect.
Which I think we all,
yeah,
fall victim to from time to time.
The halo effect is a classic example of how our perceptions can be influenced by superficial factors. It's the tendency to judge someone's overall character based on a single positive trait.
So, like, if someone is really attractive, we might automatically assume that they're also intelligent, kind, and trustworthy.
Exactly.
Even though we have no real evidence to support that assumption.
Or if someone's successful in their career, we might assume they're competent in other areas of their life, even though those things might be totally unrelated.
I guess it's kind of like that saying, never judge a book by its cover.
Right.
But we do it all the time anyway.
We do. It's a natural human tendency to, seek out patterns and make quick judgments. But the halo effect can lead us to make unfair or inaccurate assessments of others. And it can also blind us to their flaws or negative qualities.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap? Should we just wear blindfolds when we meet new people?
Well, that might be a bit extreme. But a more practical approach is to be aware of the halo effect and to make a conscious effort to evaluate people based on their individual qualities rather than on a single, often superficial trait.
So basically, don't let first impressions or surface level judgments cloud our ability to see the whole person.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone is a complex mix of strengths and weaknesses, and that true understanding requires looking beyond the halo.
It's a great reminder to approach others with open minds and hearts.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of open minds, Dobelli also talks about the importance of recognizing and challenging our own confirmation bias.
Yes, confirmation bias.
Okay.
This one is particularly pernicious because it's so deeply ingrained in our thinking. It's the tendency to seek out and interpret information in a way that confirms our existing beliefs while ignoring or downplaying evidence that contradicts them.
So it's like we're filtering the world through our own pre-existing lens, only seeing what we want to see.
Exactly. And this can lead us to, make bad decisions, hold on to false beliefs, and even miss out on opportunities to learn and grow.
I guess it's kind of like that saying, you see what you want to see.
Precisely. And the more strongly we hold on to a belief, the more likely we are to fall prey to confirmation bias.
So how do we break free from this cycle of self-deception? It feels like it can be so hard to challenge our own beliefs.
It is challenging, but awareness is the first step. Once you start to recognize the signs of confirmation bias in yourself, for example, selectively seeking out information that supports your views, dismissing opposing viewpoints without careful consideration, or interpreting ambiguous evidence in a way that confirms your beliefs, you can start to question those patterns of thinking.
So it's about being more open to different perspectives.
Exactly.
And being willing to consider evidence that challenges our assumptions.
It's about cultivating intellectual humility and recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
And speaking of things that we might not know, Dobelli also talks about the importance of recognizing and navigating the unknown, which he refers to as the black swan problem.
Yes, the black swan problem. This one is all about the limits of our knowledge and the unpredictable nature of the world.
So like those unexpected events that come out of nowhere and totally disrupt our plans and assumptions.
Exactly. Dobelli uses the metaphor of a black swan to illustrate this concept. For centuries, people in Europe believed that all swans were white simply because they'd never seen a black swan. But then explorers discovered black swans in Australia, shattering that long-held belief.
So the black swan represents those events that are so unexpected and improbable that we don't even consider them as possibilities.
Precisely. And these black swan events can have a profound impact on our lives, both positive and negative. They can be unexpected breakthroughs, like the invention of the internet, or they can be devastating crises, like, the 2008 financial collapse.
So how do we prepare for something that we can't even predict?
Right.
It feels like a bit of a paradox.
It is a challenge.
Yeah.
But Dobelli suggests a few strategies for navigating the unknown.
Okay.
First, be humble about the limits of your knowledge and recognize that you can't predict everything.
So basically, don't get too cocky and assume you have it all figured out.
Right. Second, be open to new information and perspectives, even if they challenge your existing beliefs.
So basically, stay curious and be willing to learn from unexpected sources.
Precisely. And finally, build resilience and adaptability into your life. So that you can better cope with those inevitable surprises that will come your way.
So basically, be prepared to roll with the punches.
Exactly. It's about embracing the uncertainty of life. And recognizing that sometimes the most unexpected events can lead to the greatest opportunities for growth and transformation.
That's a good point. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of mental traps so far. Survivorship bias. The sunk cost fallacy. The paradox of choice. Social proof. The availability bias. The story bias. The halo effect, confirmation bias, and even like the black swan problem. My brain is officially doing mental gymnastics over here.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but the good news is just by becoming aware of these thinking errors, we're already taking a big step towards making better decisions. It's like Dobelli says sometimes, negative knowledge, knowing what not to do, can be more valuable than
positive knowledge. That's a great point. It's like learning from our mistakes, but on a mental level.
Exactly.
So what other lessons can we learn from the art of thinking clearly?
Well, one that really struck me is the importance of understanding the power of framing.
Framing? What does that mean exactly?
So it's about how the way information is presented or framed can significantly influence our perceptions and decisions. Dobelli gives the example of a medical procedure that has a 90% survival rate versus a 10% mortality rate.
So it's the same information, just presented in different ways, but one sounds a lot more positive than the other.
Exactly. Even though the outcome is the same. The framing can evoke very different emotional responses and influence our choices.
That's fascinating. So it's not just about the facts themselves, but about how those facts are presented to us.
Exactly. And this is something that marketers, politicians, even the media use all the time to shape our opinions and behavior.
That's a bit concerning. So how do we avoid being manipulated by framing?
Dobelli suggests a few strategies. First, be aware of the power of framing and look for alternative ways to present the same information.
So basically, don't just accept the first version of the story you hear.
Exactly. Second, focus on the underlying data and evidence rather than getting swayed by, emotional language or persuasive rhetoric.
So basically look beyond the spin and get to the heart of the matter.
Precisely. And finally, be willing to challenge your own assumptions and biases, recognizing that you might be influenced by framing without even realizing it.
So it's about being more critical thinkers and questioning how information is being presented to us.
Exactly. It's about taking control of our own decision-making processes and not letting others frame our reality for us.
This deep dive has been incredible.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I feel like I'm armed with like a whole new set of mental tools to navigate the world more effectively. Any final words of wisdom from the art of thinking clearly?
Well, as we wrap up this exploration of Rolf Dobelli's insightful work, it's crucial to remember that the journey toward clearer thinking is ongoing. It's not about achieving perfection or eliminating all errors. That's simply not realistic. Instead, it's about cultivating this mindset of continuous learning, self-reflection, and a healthy dose of skepticism.
So basically embrace the journey and be kind to ourselves along the way.
Exactly. And remember, by acknowledging our own cognitive biases and actively seeking out diverse perspectives, we can make more informed decisions, navigate complex situations with greater clarity, and ultimately lead more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating world
Absolutely.
of thinking errors and have come away with some valuable insights to apply to your own lives.
For sure.
Until next time, stay curious.
Yeah.
Stay thoughtful.
Absolutely.
And keep those mental gears turning.
Keep learning.